Truth on my blade, every line's exploded. You swing your words, I counter with precision. Battle of reason, this is my mission. Raise your fist, let them know. No, raise your voice, let it blow. Woo! We clash our swords of reason. Cut through like no retreating. Yeah. No fear, no chain, no treason. Woo! We clash our swords of reason.
Alrighty, welcome everybody to Swords of Reason right here on SpeakeaZy Show. Today's debate prompt: warrantless surveillance is justified in the name of national security. So let's meet today's debaters. For the affirmative, we have Abe Dinkus, who has a channel right here on YouTube where he focuses on politics, hot topic discussions, and debates. For the negative, we have EOD696, who also has a channel here on YouTube, where he also focuses on politics, hot topic discussions, and the occasional gaming. Whenever you're ready, Abe, I will start the timer up with your time. And thank you both for being here.
Is my mic still good? Okay, awesome. Imagine a world where a single encrypted message slips through the cracks, unseen, unmonitored, and detonates in the heart of a crowded city, claiming hundreds of innocent lives. This is not fiction. It is a stark reality we face in an era of global terrorism, cyber threats, and rogue actors who exploit our freedoms to plot our own destruction. Today, I stand affirmatively to defend the resolution. Warrantless surveillance is justified in the interest of national security. At its core, national security is the bedrock of any sovereign nation's survival. Without it, rights to privacy become hollow luxuries afforded only to the dead. The Constitution was never intended as a suicide pact. Justice Robert Jackson warned in his 1949 case, reminding us that even our most sacred amendments bend under existential pressure. History bears witness. The NSA's PRISM program, revealed in 2013, disrupted over 50 terrorist plots worldwide, including attempts on U.S. soil, by intercepting communications without traditional warrants in real-time threat environments. In 2023 alone, the FBI use of Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act offered often warrantless for foreign targets, thwarted cyber attacks from state actors like China and Russia, protecting critical infrastructure that powers our hospitals, power grids, and economies. Critics cry invasion of privacy, but this is a false dichotomy. Warrantless surveillance targets metadata and foreign communications, not the casual emails of law-abiding citizens. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches. In the face of imminent danger, where a warrant could mean the difference between prevention and catastrophe, speed trumps bureaucracy. Let's examine the Fourth Amendment's own limitations, precedents that prove flexibility in crisis. Number 1, the border search exception. United States v. Ramsey, 1977. The Supreme Court upheld warrantless searches of international mail at the border, citing national security and sovereignty. No probable cause needed, because threats enter from outside. Number 2, the exigent circumstance doctrine. Warden versus Hayden, 1967. Police may enter homes without warrants to prevent imminent harm, like a terrorist fleeing with a bomb. The court ruled the Fourth Amendment does not require police to delay in the face of danger. Number 3, the special needs exception. Veronica School District versus Acton, 1995. Random drug testing of students, athletes, was upheld without individualized suspicion. Why? Public safety outweighed privacy. National security is the ultimate special need. Now, the Fifth Amendment, invoked with cries of self-incrimination, also yields to necessity. Number 1, the required records doctrine. Shapiro versus United States, 1948. Businesses must surrender records to regulators without invoking the Fifth, even if incriminating. National security demands similar compelled disclosures. Think financial metadata flagging terrorist funding. Number 2, The public safety exception, New York versus Quarles, 1984. Police may question suspects without Miranda warnings if public safety is at stake, like asking a bomber where the device is hidden. Warrantless surveillance is the digital equivalent, preemptive questioning of data streams. Number 3, immunity and national security letters, NSLs. Under the Patriot Act, the FBI issued NSLs demanding records without judicial review, upheld in Doe versus Ashcroft, 2004. The Fifth Amendment does not block compelled production when national survival is on the line. These are not anomalies. They are judicially recognized exceptions, proving that neither the Fourth nor the Fifth Amendment is absolute. The Constitution adapts. It must. We do not advocate unchecked power. Robust oversight exists. Congressional review via the intelligence committees. FISA courts approving bulk collection frameworks. Independent inspectors general auditing compliance. And minimalization procedures scrubbing U.S. personal data. In 2022, the FISA court reported 0 international violations in Section 702 queries. A record of discipline, not abuse. The affirmative case rests on 3 pillars. 1, proven efficiency. PRISM stopped the 2012 plot to bomb the New York Stock Exchange. Section 702 exposed the 2021 SolarWinds New York stock hack. SolarWinds hacked by Russia, preventing a digital 9/11.
Your mic is getting fucked up.
Number 2, proportionality. The risk is existential. 1 unmonitored call, 1 untracked transfer, 1 undetected login, and thousands die. Privacy yields to survival. Number 3, safeguards. Sunset clauses, declassification mandates, and whistleblower protections, like Snowden's own channel, ignored, ensure accountability. Denying these tools handcuffs our defenders while empowering our enemies. The negative may romanticize privacy, but they offer no alternative when seconds matter. Encryption apps like Signal shield terrorists as effectively as citizens. End-to-end encryption without backdoors? That's a death sentence for intelligence. I urge you, prioritize survival over suspicion. The Constitution bends so the nation does not break. Affirm the resolution. Thank you.
And with that, EOD, whenever you are ready, I will start the timer up with your voice. And again, thank you both for being here.
All right, yeah, thanks for having us. I guess I'll start by saying, first of all, happy birthday to the Marine Corps. Happy birthday to all the Marines out there. It is Marine Corps birthday and Veterans Day tomorrow, so cheers to that. But I want to start my opening statement by saying that what the text of the Fourth Amendment actually is. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Just like number 2 in that way, right? It's very succinct and to the point. No warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, the persons or things to be seized. Now, what my opponent is advocating for is that in the interest of national security, based on these irrelevant precedents in many cases, a drug testing of an athlete, this is something that doesn't really pertain or relate to national security, right? Police may enter homes without a warrant, does not necessarily pertain to national security. Again, the prompt is really about how do we keep our country and our borders safe. And my opponent will say that there is some exception within the text of the Fourth Amendment that I just read to you that says, when it comes to foreign actors or United States citizens who are being affiliated with foreign actors, there's some sort of exception there. I don't see one. I'm not reading one there. It is pretty well descript and open and straight and to the point, without a judge, without probable cause, without describing what should be searched or persons or things to be seized. There is no warrant, and there is no proper due process being involved here. It violates fundamental constitutional protections without due process, right? And this all starts as far back as 1956, where the FBI was issuing warrantless surveillance on activists such as Martin Luther King Jr., such as Malcolm X, such as the Black Panthers, simply because they were speaking up and having a rile with the state in general. Because these people were dissenting, they had their Fourth Amendment rights retracted and rescinded and simply ignored. And since then, such practices have been, chastised and ridiculed by members of Congress, members of the government, but they go back and they reinvent new ways to do it again and again and again. They say, oops, our bad, let's fix that. And meanwhile, we're going to implement this new thing that actually does exactly the same thing, such as the Patriot Act, followed up by the Freedom Act. The Freedom Act supposedly repealed the ability of the federal government to mass surveil or collect data on a mass of Americans simply because they might catch something in the fishnet of billions and billions and billions of records of people's social media profiles, their direct messages, your text messages, your phone conversations. All of these things are being collected, your location data. Facial recognition when you're walking the streets. All of these things are being collected in this huge sweep and being pooled in one gigantic intelligence pool in order to hopefully at some point, maybe we might actually catch a terrorist one time. And yet in 2013, a White House report going back over to the Patriot Act realized it resulted in zero. That's right, a total of zero terrorist stoppages or events of any kind. When the Freedom Act, the United States Freedom Act, actually got passed and forced the Gestapos, the NSA, and the FBI to actually go through the courts, go through FISA courts in order to obtain warrants on an expedited basis, those numbers actually went up. Actually started making more arrests when warranted surveillance was involved, because the data analysts who were looking over everything weren't completely overwhelmed by tons and tons and tons of innocent people's completely irrelevant data. So in reality, not only is it a violation of the premise, right? The ideal being that we're prioritizing security over liberty in order to maintain the security of the United States. In fact, it results in less security for the United States when we don't have warrants, when we don't target our investigations or our resources on what is actually the problem. And instead, we just cast wide dragnets out to gather up as much data as we possibly can in order to catch one or two potential criminals. In reality, what we end up doing is sending ATF agents and FBI agents to raid the homes of innocent people at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, only to find out weeks later, after millions of dollars of resources have already been wasted, that this person had absolutely nothing to do with what we were trying to prove in the first place. And now the State Department is at risk of a civil suit for wrongful prosecution. So this enables government overreach and abuse, not security. Snowden, if he taught us anything, it was that the NSA was absolutely overreaching its mandate. They weren't necessarily investigating terrorists as much as they were investigating United States citizens that had any sort of relationship overseas. There's a government program that was conducted by the UK called the GHCQ, the Government Communications monitoring system of in the UK. And what they ended up doing was tapping the transatlantic phone lines and communication lines that tie the United States to Europe. Every piece of communication going between the United States and Europe was actually picked up and gathered by this. It was ruled inhumane by the United Nations, and much of their data got shared with the NSA for unwarranted surveillance against United States citizens, and against British citizens, and against French citizens, and German citizens, and people all over the world. All of this has been completely ineffective. My opponent's going to be able to list a handful of cases where horrific events may have been prevented. And that the problem with that is it absolutely pales in comparison to the vast quantities of individuals across the world, not just in the United States, but all across the world, whose privacy and rights have been absolutely impeded and intruded upon for the sake of a handful of criminals, where a warranted targeted surveillance program probably would have been more effective in the first place. Then at the end of the day, the worst part of it is that all of this erodes public trust in government and international trade institutions. You have people, over 16% of people on the internet actually stop and think about what they're trying to say, instead of speaking their mind freely and completely, as every American citizen should feel completely entitled to do. Instead, I have to be up here and say things like schmurder and grape and this, that, and the other thing, simply because of the surveillance that's going on within the umbrella of YouTube. Then you have to take a step back and say, okay, well, if my local police department suspects me of any sort of crime or anything like that, they can petition YouTube for all the data that I've spoken or said or uploaded or commented at any point anywhere on this entire platform. Then beyond that, the NSA might just go through a big sweeping motion to purchase tons and tons of data from all over the world from these social media companies, because they get to sell it. They sell it all the time. Why do you think apps are free? They're selling your data on the back end, and there's nothing stopping law enforcement agencies from participating in that market and buying up all of the data and all of the little tidbits of your life, in every place you've ever been, in every place you've looked at the weather, every place you've received a text message or a phone call, and the contents therein. And programs like the Patriot Act, like the United States Freedom Act, simply perpetuate this arena where the federal law enforcement and global law enforcement agencies can operate without impunity and without being checked and without being oversighted, and simply just gather up as much data as possible about as many citizens as they can for Lord knows what types of purposes. When they detect a crime, they're obligated to report it regardless of whether or not they were looking for that crime in the first place. This is the point of warrants. A law is only as good as its enforceability, and when you surveil every single aspect of everybody's lives and every word that's spoken in somebody's house because they happen to have an Alexa, because they happen to be sitting next to a smartphone, now it has gone completely and utterly off the hinges. It's off the rails. We're getting into Orwellian territory at this point. I'm just waiting for Big Brother to come up on my phone and tell me, bend over and touch your toes. That's a scene from 1984, if you didn't know. All right, so in summation, warrantless surveillance isn't a justified necessity. It's a counterproductive overreach that trades real liberties for illusory security. True national security stems from rule of law, targeted intelligence, and public buy-in, not blanket suspicion. As Benjamin Franklin warned, those who give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither. Evidence from decades of programs proves this trade-off fails on its own terms. And I'll yield my time.
With that, we're going to give the mic back to Abe for your 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttal. So, Abe, whenever you're ready, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Well, I find it funny, and I noticed that my opponent brought up only a few actual cases of overstepping, and that's bound to happen. It doesn't mean that it's unuseful. It seems funny that he turned almost exclusively to emotional states and some semblance of an expectation of privacy in public places and with public means. So you have data that can be collected legally without a warrant at any time. All of your data is going through some central hub of some kind, which gives that company access to all of that information. And he says some little safety for security, but in reality, we're talking about tens of thousands of lives. Okay, he says some little security or some little safety instead of liberty, but the truth of the matter is we're talking about thousands to tens of thousands of lives, as we've seen in the modern era, that we have many programs that do not utilize warrants, and it is better that they do not have to do so in order to stop the loss of tens of thousands of lives. We've seen at the very least 50 cases with Section 702, and I would say that the courts have agreed that they have the right to take that information without a warrant, and it's already happening now. So you can argue the ought in this, but the is has shown that it's effective and it works at stopping these attacks. And I would also inform you that on the other end of this, we have plenty of cases where information was already gathered and held and not utilized due to a need for a warrant where lives have been lost. multiple times over the last decade, we have seen mass events that could have been stopped had we utilized the information we had, even though we couldn't obtain a warrant to stop the criminal from doing the act. We wouldn't have to arrest. We could literally detain and gather more intelligence, and it would have stopped these events from happening. We didn't do so because of the exact thing he's saying, the emotional appeal for privacy, some semblance of privacy outside of your home through digital means. I would say if you're putting it out into the ether, then it's out in the ether. It's no longer in your home. That's not unreasonable search and seizure. That signal, that message, that digital information has left you and traveled through the lines. And at that point, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy on that information. I think that's all I've got to say.
And with that, we're going to hand the mic back to EOD for a 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttal. And whenever you're ready, EOD, I'll start the timer up with your voice.
All right, yeah. Well, I have a litany of examples. Actually, I was kind of holding on to that. I wanted to get the general idea out in the ether first, but my opponent has said that there's proven efficiency. In reality, exposed by the New York Times 2005 ACLU lawsuit. Realized that the NSA collected bulk phone metadata and internet communications of nearly all Americans without FISA warrants at all. Parts of it were shut down in 2007. The courts do not agree with this. The courts continually shut these things down, and then Congress continually reinvents the wheel to try and bring the ability for the NSA and for the FBI to do warrantless surveillance back again, over and over again. This has happened. It started back all the way back in 1956 with the counterintelligence program, which I did mention, where they went after civil rights leaders. Then in 1967, the CIA illegally surveilled 300,000 Americans opposing the Vietnam War, compiling 72,000 files without warrants. Has violated the CIA charter, and an oversight committee called it clearly illegal. Shut it down. You say that it saved tens of thousands of lives, and yet you presented no evidence in order to support this. In reality, the vast majority of what happens by these warrantless surveillance programs is that people's rights get violated. They get accused of being a criminal, and the investigation goes nowhere. It ends up leading to a dead end, or they arrest someone wrongfully and face civil action as a result. Yeah. What else have we got in here? The courts have agreed. They have not agreed. I've already demonstrated that. There's instances you said where information was not used, and yet an attack still happened. With the FISA courts, that's what the FISA courts were designed to do. Within a couple of hours, they can grant a warrant. In order for someone to be detained, you do not need a warrant. We don't need that right now. The federal agents can detain someone without a warrant on a lickety split little dilly bop. All they need is a reasonable cause, right? And a lot of this that we're talking about doesn't necessarily apply to foreign actors who are outside the United States or outside the jurisdiction of the United States. Where and how we can make a difference is with citizens of the United States, and under which the Fourth Amendment does holistically apply. And that's where the wrongdoing is happening, which I'm concerned about. And you don't seem to be the least bit concerned about. Yeah. With government actors being able to purchase social media data from agencies such as Amazon, such as Google, such as Facebook, this simply breeds a whole litany of issues and problems with how law gets enforced, how people are prosecuted or not prosecuted based upon information that government agencies can pull out of the ether simply by signing a check over to Google or whoever. And increasingly in the past several years, since the Patriot Act was formed, Google has seen increasing amounts of requests from government agencies year after year after year after year. And it's gotten into to the tune of tens of millions of Americans every single year are being probed and interned by the government without even their knowledge in a lot of cases, and being impugned, and their freaking phones are being searched. Yeah, Yeah, in the 2000s, there was this program called Stingray, the MC Catcher, where they're actually latching on to the SIM cards in people's phones and tracking everything that phone does and everywhere that phone goes. The Cloud Act that was just approved by the Trump administration, not even that long ago, enables companies to go out and purchase data from data brokers from all over the world. And then the freaking Europeans are all complicit in this too. And we have these intelligence networks that communicate with each other through international borders. They're all sharing notes, and it in every step of the way brings us closer to the social credit system from George Orwell's fucking horror story and contemporary People's Republic of China, if you can even call it that. But with that, I'll yield whatever's left on the clock there.
Both of you, thank you so much for joining tonight. And whoever wants to open up the open floor, I will start the timer with your voice.
Yeah, well, one thing I didn't address that I intended to was, Abe, you mentioned that once you put it out there, it's out in the ether and is no longer your personal property. But when I put something in the mail and I put it into the stewardship of the federal government, they have an obligation to not unseal that package. Isn't that so? That's still my private property in a package that I sent, right? Through a mail or a postal service or parcel service like UPS.
Is it your private property once it's left your hands, EOD?
Yes.
So
it's still my property inside that box. I intend for it to get to wherever it's going.
Okay, that's fine. But when you look at these things, is there some reason that somebody seeing what's inside of that box would jeopardize your rights?
Yeah. It's definitely an invasion of privacy. First of all, one of the two things that you talked about was the Fifth Amendment. It could be self-incriminating. It might be a letter to my wife to tell her not to pay our taxes this year or whatever.
Okay, so you would rather
the government should be snooping around in my damn mail. That's bullshit.
Well, first of all, it's not physical mail, right? This is digital information being sent through multiple other corporations that are not.
But if you want to go back to the reality of the situation, yeah, people sending messages on something like an encrypted messaging service should not be subject to warrant.
See, I partially,
unless they're suspected of a crime, unless they're reasonably suspected of a crime, or there's a warrant that points to their involvement in some sort of criminal.
Well, generally speaking, that's exactly when they're going to utilize warrantless surveillance of some kind. In the first place, they've already gathered some level of.
I've already demonstrated on several occasions where warrantless surveillance has just been a huge dragnet where they just suck in as much data as they possibly can.
So you think if they, during the San Bernardino shooting, if they had access to like Apple's encryption, you don't think they could have stopped that mass event?
I don't think that
they knew they had already listed the fellow as a threat. They already knew there was something going on with him, and yet they didn't have access.
What's stopping them from detaining him? That's bullshit. They can detain somebody without a warrant. They can detain somebody based on reasonable suspicion. So I don't believe that. If they had enough of a suspicion to know that he was going to commit a crime, they should have detained him. If they didn't, that's a failure on the people operating the agency. That's not a failure on the Fourth Amendment protections offered by the Constitution.
What do you even mean? Like, I don't. You're saying that it's an arrest for things prior to them happening should have just happened.
I'm saying that if they knew that he was going to do what he did at the time and place where he did it, then they should have detained him.
I didn't say that they knew. I didn't say they knew he was going to do it in the time and place. However, if they had access to the information, because he was already on the list of people being watched because of prior statements, they would have known about the event. This is true with multiple cases across time in the United States. Since the advent of technology,
wait. Hold on. I don't understand your argument. Let me make sure that I understand. So you're saying that what are you saying that they knew about San Bernardino where they didn't have what they needed to get a warrant?
I'm saying the FBI already had him on a watch list as a potential threat, as a terror-based actor, and they did not gather further intelligence.
Is it possible for someone to be listed on a watch list that isn't necessarily a threat?
Sure.
Is it possible for that to be like a case of mistaken identity?
Sure. And in which at what point? Why would it hurt for them to check to make sure they're not actually going to take the lives of tens or or more. At which point,
Well, again, it becomes
is there a
an
disconnect
argument
for
of
you?
time and place. Are the investigators aware of something imminent about to happen or not? Right, that becomes the question, and it's exactly why FISA warrants were created in the first place. Is to expedite the warrant process to get it within hours rather than days or weeks or months or whatever. That's what FISA courts were built for. And I don't necessarily agree with the FISA court system. It's a less than ideal system, but at least there is some judicial oversight in what's going on here, instead of the NSA or the FBI just going out and dragnetting every piece of information that they possibly can about every single human being in the United States. That's what I'm mainly concerned about. I don't want to stop the FBI from looking at somebody and saying, this dude's about to do something in the next week. How come we can't do anything about it? That they should be able to at least, detain that person, in my opinion. But
willy-nilly, they don't have the rest of the information.
If they know that he's going to do something in the next week or two.
Okay, so think about this. A private business, which is Apple, had the information that this attack was going to happen. This person was already on a watch list because they were a suspected actor, and they could do nothing.
So you're making an assertion there that I don't think is true. If Apple had knowledge of a crime was about to be committed, then they had an obligation to report that.
False. They would not open the encryption system to the federal.
That's not reporting on something that they are aware of. So you're describing two different things.
And we found out after the fact.
I'm saying that they say, okay, we know something's going to happen here on this day. Here's a tip to the FBI. That's one thing. You're saying they just need to have a back door open willy-nilly for the NSA to poke their head in anytime they want to. That's completely different. That is not acceptable.
Okay, do you believe that there should either the private companies have to report every form of stepping outside of the bounds of a threat or an action, or the government has to have access to the information in order to stop these events from happening?
That's a false dichotomy. There are things that are actionable. There are things that are not. Right? Like it's reasonable to assume that if I make a joke that I'm going to come over to your house and kick you in the nuts, that I'm not actually going to come over to your house and kick you in the nuts. That's not actionable. But if I say I'm going to show up at this bank on this day at this time, and then I'm going to walk out of there with all the money that they have, that's something else.
Okay, so here's the issue with what you're saying. You say this, and sure, it sounds good coming out of your mouth, but the problem is when you look at things like 9/11, you look at the Fort Hood shooting, you look at all these instances where we could have taken action had we gathered more intelligence, and were unable to gather that intelligence due to.
You're making an assertion that I don't think necessarily applies. In the Fort Hood shooting, okay, how would warrantless surveillance have prevented that? Let's just start with that, okay?
Well, I wrote it down in my notes. The FBI monitored Hassan's emails. Radical cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, known Al-Qaeda, for months joined terrorism Joint Terrorism Task Force reviewed, but deemed them consistent with research. The information was never shared because there was no warrant for the access to the information. So, they knew FBI had all this information, and no action was taken on this.
So,
but they couldn't say he's for sure going to do something. So
you're saying that they had emails that mildly associated this guy with a terrorist group, and then then what? They're supposed to arrest him simply for having emails?
That's not what I didn't say that. They could have done further digging into this person because of the information that was gathered.
The other part of this is this person a United States citizen or not? This is the other aspect of my concern.
He was
the Fourth
military
Amendment should
personnel.
only apply to American citizens. If he's, what do you mean?
He was a sergeant in the military. So, again,
how do you, I don't know. Okay, wait. In any case, there apparently. So you're saying that they had some emails which were consistent with research that mildly associated him with a terrorist group. That doesn't sound like any sort of evidence that would have prevented the attack on Fort Hood.
Okay, they started a full investigation, and then the case was closed due to insufficient evidence because they could not obtain warrants to access greater amounts of information from the person. Even though they knew that there was communication going on between this individual and radical clerics who were Al-Qaeda at the time. No action taken because there was no warrants issued so that they could gather more intelligence on the communications. So we'll just let that happen. The same is true for my notes are full of events that could have been stopped. We had prior information. We could not obtain warrants because what? Because we're overstepping the person's expectation of privacy. And then the end result is the loss of tens or dozens or hundreds of lives. Pulse Nightclub's the same story. We have prior information, but no warrant obtained. So then the event goes on and happens. At what point do you say, maybe we have to give a little bit further access to stop the loss of life and the security of the American people? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but what are the tenets that the government is our federal government is responsible for? The defense of the American people? The rights of the American people?
I think you're making a lot of assumptions based on not a lot of information. Okay, it's like, what could we have learned about the Pulse night shooting guy with a warrantless surveillance that we didn't already know? You're saying that we already knew that these people were associated with radical ideals or radical groups, and yet we couldn't get a judge to accept the ideal for a warrant. Are these going through FISA courts, or are they not going through FISA courts? That's another question I have. The whole FISA system was intended to stop terrorist activities like this. If it's not going through that system, then it's not leveraging the totality of what the justice system provides as mechanisms in order to try and act on these things. Right. A lot of this can boil down to just poor leadership on the part of the FBI. It doesn't have to be, oh, let's get rid of the Fourth Amendment. Let's get rid of reasonable search and seizure.
Nobody said that.
Simply because the FBI won't shit or get off the pot.
Nobody said that. The difference is you're saying unreasonable, as if the government doesn't have reason to actually do these searches, right?
It doesn't. Okay, and again, I'll go over the Stingray misuse.
So communication
from the 2000s until present. Okay, they've collected data on thousands of innocent people. The ACLU has documented thousands of cases where police departments are surveilling and monitoring people's actions and people's movements throughout the city without a warrant, without any reason, without any cause, simply because they can, simply because there's nobody
causing what damage
doing it. And it's not actually producing any results. It's simply an incrimination of innocent people for no reason whatsoever.
Is there a chance that lives will be saved through that access to information?
So far, no. None of it has actually resulted in any anti-terroristic activities. Instead, what it's doing is...
You want me to believe there's no chance?
It is enabling the police to overstep their boundaries as created and defined by the Constitution of these United States.
So you expect all of us to believe... You expect us to believe that there's no chance that level of surveillance could save lives, could prevent the death of American citizens on American soil.
I don't think that level of surveillance is necessary in order to save lives. In 2009, a subway bombing was stopped by warrants given by FISA courts. In 2001, unwarranted surveillance programs have been shut down across the world by UN diplomats. In 2002 to 2014, the New York Police Department, actually put thousands upon thousands of Muslim people on and mosques under targeted surveillance, and ended up producing no terroristic leads in 12 years. They violated all of these people's rights, all of these people who had nothing to do with any sort of radical imams or radical counselors or anything like that, under the fucking microscope of the NYPD, lurking around every corner, and them being paranoid about what they were going to do. Half of them ended up in court for nothing, and it gets settled out of court because the DA can't fucking prosecute it. In 12 years, not one turn up from this NYPD fucking program that targeted Muslims for no good fucking reason.
Oh man, maybe if they didn't need to get a warrant for every piece of information, they could have found more.
That was warrantless. That was warrantless surveillance, where they produced no results. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Do American citizens have a reasonable expectation to be protected by the government?
In 2000s to 2010, the fusion centers, okay, they're trying to coalesce and coagulate all of these different.
You're just going to dodge my question?
It's a rhetorical question. You can answer.
No, it's not. Does the American government have do you have a reasonable expectation as a citizen of the United States to be protected by the federal government?
Yes, but
no?
I also have a reasonable expectation that the government is not going to look up my ass with a microscope every time I fucking cough. That's also a reasonable expectation that I have. I have a reasonable expectation that cops are not going to burst through my door and say, "Oh no, we thought there might be a fire."
This is an appeal to emotion. This is an appeal to emotion you're doing right now. They're not.
So is what you're doing.
Surveillance is not the same as them kicking in your door.
Government have a reasonable expectation to keep the citizens safe.
Surveillance is not kicking in your door and arresting you. Surveillance is information gathering. It is not kicking in your door and arresting you.
Arresting you. I said kicking in the door and saying, "Oh, we thought there was a fire in here because you're smoking."
Again, that's not surveillance.
It is surveillance.
Kicking.
Yes, it is. Looking and seeing smoke come out of a window and then kicking the door down because they think it's a fire is surveillance, right?
Well, then if somebody called the fire department, they would do the same thing without a warrant. So.
Kicking down the door.
Again, that's an appeal to emotion that you're making. You're saying this could happen, so I'm not okay with it, even though it's not happened, hasn't happened. You're just making up a scenario. No, you just used like an anecdotal possibility that it could happen to you as your argumentation against unwarranted surveillance, which has nothing to do with them kicking in your door, and you've now linked your a feeling that you would feel if something happened to surveillance somehow. Like, that doesn't even make sense. That didn't even track.
Okay, yes. What is the result of surveillance? Is they kick in the door and then they arrest you. They accuse you of doing something that you have never done or have never even been remotely associated with. The ACLU has prosecuted thousands of cases like this over the years since the Patriot Act was instituted by George Bush back in 2001. They've been fighting against 702 since it was passed. So this shit does happen. Okay. When when the government casts a dragnet in order to look for any sort of tie to any sort of terroristic activity, okay, you pick up people that just happen to live within a few blocks of one another or happen to frequent the same coffee shop, and it's guilt by association. Those people ended up being wrongly prosecuted. It gets thrown out of court. The government settles out of court, and it's a whole rigmarole and a whole waste of resources. It's a waste of intelligence. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. We can do so much better if we just focus our intelligence efforts and use FISA courts and FISA warrants in order to do that, in order to bring the scope down and actually focus on the problem instead of trying to gather everybody's data all together.
So what do you do if EOD, there isn't time for the filing of a FISA warrant and loss of life is going to happen? What do you do then?
I don't know. You tell me.
What if you have reasonable suspicion of something, EOD, but no warrant? What do you do? Reasonable suspicion that say there is a terrorist threat in a city. What do? You just wait?
Well,
just wait for the warrant. Wait for the warrant. Everyone will die, but wait for the warrant and it'll be fine.
I detain that person. That's what they should do. That's what I've been saying since opening statements.
So black bags.
They don't need a warrant to detain.
Black bags are better than surveillance. Just detain everybody. It's better than surveillance.
If you have a time and a date where this thing is going to go down, yeah, absolutely. Because widespread surveillance results in more innocent people being caught up in the system and more resources being wasted. Not to mention the fact that you're providing a ripe opportunity for
Did you listen to my opening statement?
For the government to prosecute its political opponents, as has happened in the past.
Did you listen to my opening statement?
Historically, repeatedly throughout.
Did you listen to my opening statement, Yodi?
Of course I did. And I made all kinds of notes here are some of them? Let me share them with you. Okay, first of all, you said that there's a proven efficiency to it. I proved that false. They
You didn't
drag
prove
a
anything.
dragnet and involve millions of people in order to catch. How many did you say? 50?
You've
That
proved
sounds
nothing.
like a complete imbalance of power
Oh.
and imbalance of justice to me. You say it
Has
saved
one person
tens of
ever
thousands
killed
of lives,
100?
but you haven't actually provided examples of how it saved tens of thousands of lives. You provided an example of how it saved a dozen lives here, maybe 5 lives there. Like, okay, or it might have. Whereas
Oh.
at the end of the day, even having the intelligence that they needed to appropriately detain these people didn't convince them to do it. Again, you're pointing at mismanagement of the FBI, execution of the FBI as an excuse to erode Fourth Amendment rights for all of the country. I think this is insanity. You said that the courts have agreed. I gave you example after example of how the courts have thrown out each of these warrantless surveillance programs that the government has engaged in time and time again, and Congress or the president will just go back and reinvent it so that they can continue to do it and continue to erode our Fourth Amendment rights. You said that it's an argument over ought versus is, and here I am. I'm telling you that the courts don't agree, that it doesn't exactly save tens of thousands of lives.
Then why have they upheld Section 702? Then why have they upheld Section 702 in federal, in appellate, in every court? They've upheld Section 702. Explain that to me. If you're saying that it erodes trust and no one stands for it and it isn't good, then why is the judicial system holding all the way through from the top down to it?
Okay, in the instance of 702, you're talking about an exception for foreign actors who are not U.S. citizens. Again, the Fourth Amendment should apply, and the limits on the federal government should apply to U.S. citizens, in my opinion. That's not exactly within the purview. What's alarming is when 702 tends to, again, give guilt by association to people simply because they're in the same area as these people who are involved in terroristic activities. And again, the ACLU has prosecuted thousands of cases where that's the case. They get guilt by association, and it has to be thrown out because the DOJ can't prosecute people who didn't do anything fucking wrong.
EOD, do you think that there's a chance that an attack can happen faster than a warrant can be obtained? Do you think information and messaging can happen via text, via whatever mode you prefer, that could have been intercepted and stops a bombing or a shooting of hundreds or more, can be sent before there's a chance to get a warrant, but could have been stopped if information had been gathered during that time?
Yes. And again, I'll say that an appropriate response to that would have been to either detain them or go through the FISA courts to get a warrant within a small window of a few hours, instead of going through the regular thing where you have to spend days or weeks or whatever to try to get a hold of a freaking judge. There are other ways to obtain warrants and to have judicial oversight and overview in order to scope this thing down rather than casting drag nets over the entire country, which is what the Cloud Act that Trump just passed is trying to do. So let me ask you a question, Abe. Do you think that spending billions of dollars every single year in order to surveil and warrantlessly spy on American citizens is worth it to stop some illegal immigrant from crossing the border in Mexico?
I don't think I ever made that claim.
Well, you did mention the border test, that someone coming across the border can be stopped and detained and arrested simply because of suspicion of being involved in some sort of terror plot.
True.
So
if there's reasonable suspicion of any kind of plot, then they should be able to look into it. Yes.
Yes. But the 9/11 Commission report in 2004 blamed intelligence silos and poor analysis, not a lack of data. It's not the fact that they don't have enough data. Warrantless programs like Section 215 of the Patriot Act collected billions of records, but per a 2013 White House review, stopped zero attacks. Zero attacks. Warrantless surveillance simply does not work. Casting the dragnet over everyone.
I think that's funny you say that.
You gotta have a focused perspective and focus on the problem, not just cast a wide dragnet on it. And the only way you do that is with some sort of warrant, some sort of judicial review that scopes it down. You can't just have the NSA willy-nilly have back doors into everybody's phone across the entire world. That's insane.
Again, that's just an appeal to emotion. That's just insane.
That's literally what you proposed. Is that the NSA should have the back door into the iPhone that would have prevented Fort Bragg. That's what you just said.
I did not say that. I said that they should have been given access to the files of a person that was suspected. I didn't say that they need to have full access to every person in the system. It would still be targeted. Everything we do is targeted. Just like you've already stated, FISA is a targeted application response system. The same is true for Section 702. The same is true for every program that we utilize. And there's oversight metrics for every single one of them that have been refined over time to stop the fast-paced attacks that have been seen and happened.
These oversight metrics did not exist prior to the USA Freedom Act, or whatever the hell they called it, which was supposed to be a revision of the Patriot Act. And ultimately what it ended up doing is it just gave them a workaround.
So you're saying because the system isn't
doing, and it's still going on.
Because the system isn't perfect, we should just not do anything and let whatever attacks could happen.
For warrantless surveillance is long gone, and the arena where we live, we really need to start thinking about restrictions on how social media deals with our information at large for everybody's safety, for everybody's privacy. Everything should be encrypted end to end, and nothing should be touched without a warrant. Yes, I completely fucking agree with that. At the end of the day, okay, how many terror attacks actually got stopped? How many did you say? It was 50, at least 50. But you violated the civil rights of millions of Americans.
By the way,
in order to catch 50 bad.
By the way, 50 killing 100 each or 10,000 each. It doesn't even the way that you put this is like, oh, one guy, oh man, oh nothing.
No,
one guy's never killed 100 people.
And 10,000 deaths since September 11th, 2001. Okay. That was more than one actor. That was a lot more than just one actor.
Great. One person can still do a multitude of damage, even if it's 50 person for every one person. 50 people times 50 people. Like you're saying that if there's a chance to save life through gathering of intelligence that needed to be done quickly and without a warrant, it should not be done, and those people should die because their privacy is more important than the lives of the peoples that are on the line.
Let me ask you this. Is there a chance? Okay, am I saying that? Yes. But let me ask you this. Is there a chance that I could stop one person from getting lung cancer by not smoking in public?
I can't know that.
There's been, then take it for granted, there's been studies that say secondhand smoke causes cancer, yada yada. That's a bunch of bullshit. But there is a slim possibility, given the remote nature of science and probability and statistics and everything, that me not smoking this cigarette might save one life. Should my liberty be impugned simply because of that meager, slim possibility? Or, Abe, is this country founded on the ideal that people's liberty should come first, and that law enforcement ought to be more reactionary, less proactive? We
I've
haven't
already
got
said
to the pre-crime shit yet with our sci-fi universe that we live in.
I'm not saying we need to be pre-crime, but if you know that this person is a threat, then further research into that person should be committed.
And you're saying no problem obtaining a FISA warrant within a few hours in order to dig deeper.
Really, and you say that because there's mistakes that happen in the system that we should scrap it all and just let it all happen. That's basically what you're saying. Don't do anything.
This is such an argument of absolutes. It's unreal. Only the Sith deal in absolutes, Abe. Are you a Sith Lord? Are you secretly Darth Vader over there?
Listen, it blows my mind because we brought up the Pulse nightclub, for instance. The probe was closed due to unsubstantiated closed as unsubstantial. The post-attack review found no derogatory information to justify continued surveillance. However, if continued surveillance had been done, they would have seen the plotting ahead of time. They didn't find this out until after the fact.
Do you know that? Because I don't know that. I don't know that warrantless surveillance would have fixed that problem. That's what I keep trying to tell you. You bring these issues up, and it does not seem like a warrantless dragnet over all of the American people would have solved that problem. Okay. And again, when it comes to someone you know is going to be an issue, someone who's on a watch list, you shouldn't have a problem obtaining a FISA warrant. That's what those are there for. So I've addressed this. I'm not sure how
in seconds, EOD in seconds, in seconds. If somebody's already being watched,
joking. I mean,
and you don't know, then why would you not be watching that person?
Where in history would seconds have mattered? Help me understand that. Okay, because
now at any time, because you could send a text message and detonate an explosive device. Like there's plenty
so
of
in the time
times
that I text the bomb,
we
and the
live
bomb
right
blows
now.
up, the NSA is supposed to be able to swoop in and save the day.
If they knew that you had preparatory, right? If they had known that you had already placed the bomb because you had already left some kind of message trail or some kind of data trail that says this is here, and now you have seconds to like this, you act like it's an impossibility because you can't imagine it, which is false.
It's not true. What's an impossibility? Okay, is for FISA warrants to not serve this role. That's exactly what they were built for. When somebody shows up on a watch list, it's because that they've tripped a flag or they've caught somebody's attention, or they've been associated with somebody who is part of some sort of terror watch list or something like this, and now they're on the radar. So they've already been surveilled to some extent, probably without a warrant. And where this information would normally get thrown out is when it's determined to be irrelevant or insubstantial. Okay, with FISA warrants, it's exactly supposed to avoid that precise case. That's
then
all explain
to me why there's a list of events that have happened that
because
were
of
closed. Surveillance was closed.
The law. Again,
surveillance was
not all
closed.
things have to be absolute. You're sitting here accusing me of saying we need to throw it all out and just let
That's
everything.
what you're
happen.
saying.
That's
You're saying we shouldn't have
That's
any.
not all I'm saying.
You
I'm
did
saying
say
there are
that.
provisions in place that provide judicial scope and reasonable restrictions on what.
No,
NSA
you made the claim that 702 should be shut down.
They can dig and how deep they can go.
You
And that's
said-
how it ought to be.
You made the claim that everything should be end-to-end encryption and that they should have no access to any of it. So yes, you did say it should all be thrown out because there'd be no access.
They need a reasonable suspicion that someone is in progress of committing or planning to commit a crime.
Why is there a list?
On a watch list, so they're already in that position. They're already.
Why is there a list of events?
Yes, suspicion.
Exactly. And why is there a list of people that were where there was reasonable suspicion and the case is closed?
I don't know that there was reasonable suspicion. I don't know that what kind of evidence they had prior to the attack.
If they're known to the FBI or other government agencies,
at this point, everyone is known to the FBI.
Okay, that's a silly comment to make. The Fort Hood shooting, we had information already monitored, knowing that he was part of Al Qaeda. We have the Boston Marathon bombing, which we had emails and information we did not have. They were not granted information gathering warrants from information gained from Russia. That they gave the FBI information prior to that bombing. We did not go further because we did not obtain the warrants. The investigation, again, was closed for no derogatory information. Further information could have been obtained. It did not get obtained. It was closed. They did not get the warrant. The same is true for the Pulse nightclub.
They had was too shaky in the first place.
FBI investigated Mateen twice.
What this proves
because of terrorist sympathy information.
No results. It doesn't produce
what are you talking about?
The desired outcome.
The stop point was warrants.
Hold on. Let's just be clear about what you're saying. You're saying that these people were already under surveillance, they were already being watched, and they didn't have enough information to arrest. They didn't have enough information
to couldn't look further.
They didn't have enough information to get a warrant. So the surveillance that they were doing was ineffective. So why are we wasting billions of dollars of taxpayers' money on warrantless surveillance programs that don't even work in the first place? They don't work in the first place, and all they do is erode our Fourth Amendment constitutional rights and our Fifth Amendment constitutional rights.
I don't know how you can say that when the lists basically states right in front of me that I've gathered that the FBI knew that the cases were closed because there wasn't enough to justify a warrant, and then the event happens, and it happened repeatedly. And I only started with a few. So the Boston bombing, the Pulse nightclub, the Sutherland Springs church shooting, the Parkland shooting, all of them had information gathered. No further warrants were granted because there wasn't enough information, and then the event comes and happens. And then you're going to say, oh, it wouldn't have changed anything. Even if they could have seen more, it wouldn't have changed anything. Like,
I don't think
according to their own metrics, they would have gathered enough intelligence to make choices and stop things. But you're saying that it doesn't matter that they said they could have stopped it if they had information.
You're just making a claim. what they would have saw couldn't have,
when you find the information after the fact that was already there that you could have utilized to stop an event, and you didn't gather that intelligence because you could not secure a warrant, you have to ask yourself, if we had had access to that information prior to the event, would we have been able to stop it? In these cases, it seems like they could have, but we didn't have that information because no warrant was granted. Had they been able to dig a little further, they would have been able to gather that intelligence and stop the event prior. I don't. If you vote people into office and it's the government's responsibility to protect you as an American citizen, and then it fails in that duty to protect you as an American citizen because it did not utilize the tools that it has to protect you, then I have to ask you: is our government just completely? It's just, you're saying that we shouldn't do this thing, right? That could have saved lives. Right?
No, I'm saying,
and it's the government's job to save the lives.
Save lives. Again, it's just a vapid claim. At the end of the day,
the government has one duty, and it's to protect you.
Is to secure liberty, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness for all Americans, as far as I'm concerned. But in the
can you have those things if you're dead?
States versus Hasbadrami
in
2025, a district court found that the FBI's warrantless queries of American communications collected under the FISA Section 702 violated the Fourth Amendment.
EOD.
Significant ruling against the government's practice of searching its collected data for information of U.S. citizens without a warrant. And ACLU versus Clapper, this case challenged the NSA's mass collection of Americans' phone records under 215 of the Patriot Act. The Second Circuit of Appeals ruled that the program was illegal. And what did they do? They reinvented it with that USA Freedoms Act. And they just continue to do it and continue to erode away at our rights. And it's excuse after excuse for no results and no
can you have rights?
Actual counterterrorism leads at all. The Patriot Act resulted in zero. The NYPD demographic searching of targeting of Muslims resulted in zero terrorism leads. The NSA's warrantless surveillance has resulted in what did you say? 50 potential terrorism acts have been stopped by this warrantless surveillance.
Only 50. I said at least
millions
50.
of people's rights. We need focused engagement with FISA warrants in order to actually address these things. These people that you're talking about, these instances that you're talking about, is failure of investigators to produce sufficient information and sufficient data on these potential suspects in order to obtain the warrant. That is not the fault of the Fourth Amendment. That is not the fault of the Constitution, and it does not warrant surveillance of everybody in the country and everybody who happens to be a United States citizen simply because you want Gestapo to have free reign over people's privacy. It doesn't solve the problem. Warrantless surveillance would not have solved the problem.
I don't know how you can make that claim. Again, you are making a leap of logic without. You're saying because this program here didn't, it can't do it.
Here, let's look at the Boston Marathon bombing. You mentioned that, okay? Boston Marathon bombing in 2013. This is on my counter argument list right here. And it says, after the attack, the NSA used Section 215 bulk telephoning metadata to map the foreign contacts retroactively. Review acknowledged that while the program didn't directly prevent the bombing, it demonstrated how bulk data can reconstruct networks quickly post-attack. Now, be aware of that. It's post-attack. The only way that would have helped is if they had waited until after the attack in the first place. The only thing that warrantless data and mass collection even accomplished for them, which the Supreme Court ruled was illegal after the fact, was to figure out where this guy had been. And at the end of the day, it wouldn't have prevented a damn thing. It wouldn't have prevented nothing.
Again, how do you make that claim? That it would have prevented nothing. No further gathering of intelligence would have stopped anything. How can you make that claim? How can you even justify a claim like that?
Because the intelligence that they're trying to gather under Section 702 and Section 215 of the Patriot Act is stuff like your text messages.
Metadata, communications. Yeah.
And 90% of that, you're not going to get anything from most of these people.
Really? So communications between parties that are privy to an event about to happen could have stopped nothing.
This shit has been going on since the mob was running alcohol in and out of the city and to moonshineries out in the country. Okay, they just talk in some kind of code or some kind of trash language that investigators aren't able to discern in the first damn place. The whole ideal of this, that somehow warrantless surveillance would have prevented or solved any of it, is laughable, because you already have the surveillance, you already have investigators looking at this stuff, and they're unable to obtain the warrant. So it's not a matter of a time frame being an issue or anything like that. It's a matter of investigators being unable to produce the appropriate evidence to actually go after somebody. That's what you need to fix. You need to fix the way that investigators put these people on these lists and who it is that they're actually trying to focus on and waste resources trying to investigate. They need to go after actual problems, not all American citizens.
Would you say that you would have to be alive to have rights?
You keep going back to this assertion.
I'm just curious. Do you have to be alive to have a right?
Of course you do. You have to be alive to have rights, and you have to be somewhat have your privacy intact in order to be able to exercise your rights. Without that, your political opponents are all going to end up in jail. We're all going to end up just like the Jan Sixers, 2 years, 3 years in jail with no prosecution, no court time, no court hearing whatsoever.
Does that even have to do?
You said something bad about the government one time on Facebook, so we're going to lock your ass up. That's the reality you live in.
That's an appeal to emotion.
You're
saying you don't trust the government, so the government shouldn't have information. Yes, it is. It absolutely is.
The United Kingdom of Great Britain has.
Oh, I didn't know we became
for things
Britain.
That they say on the fucking internet.
Oh,
you
we're Britain
bring
now.
That shit down here onto Americans and violate their First, Fourth, and Fifth Amendment rights simply because you want to stop a handful of terrorists from potentially committing a crime that they may or may not have actually gone through. The examples that you listed, warrantless surveillance wouldn't have helped, and the examples where it did are minuscule and ineffective at best.
The Fourth Amendment bans unreasonable searches, not all searches. The Supreme Court in United States versus Verdugo Urquez in 1990 and in redirectives explicitly held that the non-U.S. persons abroad have no Fourth Amendment rights. Okay, we already knew that, right? But you made some other claims just a minute ago. So, like, it's ineffective. That's false. DNI Clapper in 2014 reported 54 plus plots disrupted, 13 in the U.S. homeland, and 90%.
300 million ineffective.
702 and 215 metadata. The 2015 San Bernardino attack was missed because Apple encryption blocked access. Warrantless bulk tools would have caught Farouk's foreign contacts, according to the FBI. They would have caught the foreign contacts and the information being transferred between them.
This is what I was trying to describe to you. This is what the FBI wants, is a backdoor into Apple, all of Apple's stuff, all of Apple's firmware. And they're saying bulk data, being able to get that backdoor into every Apple phone in the world would have stopped it. If we could monitor every single Apple phone on Earth, we might have been able to actually prevent this. It's bullshit. They're blowing smoke up your ass. Simply because they want more power and more intelligence and more information about innocent people in order to.
So the layers of oversight don't matter to you. Just the government bad, no matter what. Even if it saves lives, government bad.
Hat for a little bit and think about who was it that actually perpetuated the lockdowns and the horseshit and the Gestapo shit that we saw during the pandemic. I'll just say that's the last time I'll say that during the coup or whatever. Okay. Who do you think was actually trying to do that? Who do you think was trying to shut down churches and open up liquor stores? And who was trying to shut down small mom and pop shops and allow big name corporations like Home Depot and Lowe's to continue to operate?
A political party?
These are the same people that want to own every aspect
of your daily
digital self. Okay.
Do you have a
you're giving them the perfect excuse without actually justifying
you have to vote them in
a reasonable or meaningful way.
Then it was the will of the people because they voted them in, and then they allowed that to happen. You're making an argument that because people who you don't like could be in government, they shouldn't have the ability to use tools that we could use to save lives against you. Is what you're saying.
That's exactly correct. Yes.
So that's just an appeal to emotion. Because I don't want my enemy to politically to have tools against me, we shouldn't stop the murder of innocents.
That's exactly what the Constitution and what the amendments of the Constitution are designed to do, is to prevent the government from overreaching its mandate and overreaching its capabilities as defined therein in the Constitution.
There's literally carve-outs for this.
We need this to stop the country from becoming a tyrannical fucking dystopic nightmare. Like I said, you're providing the perfect excuse for these nefarious actors, whoever they might be, whether it's a particular party or a particular group of individuals who seem to always win election and get appointed over and over and over again, to continue to wield an unholy power over the United States people. And we need less of that, not fucking more of it, in my opinion. I think you're crazy. I mean, again, I still have not seen how you can demonstrate that warrantless surveillance would have prevented any of this stuff.
In which of these cases?
It might not have.
In which of these cases would it have been better?
Surveillance would have absolutely done it. Okay, targeted surveillance is actually proven to be more effective. Again, because
you realize it's
aren't overwhelmed by a bunch of erroneous data that they don't need to be looking at, and they don't need to be wasting their time on anyway, or any of their services or any of their resources.
Okay, great.
If they were focused on the people who are actually causing the problems or potentially causing the problems, they might have been able to get these things stopped in the first place. And instead, that watch list is 1 million people long when it ought to be like 15.
54 terrorist plots stopped. And you're saying, oh, big whoop, that's fine.
How many years did it take them to stop 50 plots? 25?
I don't have the exact time.
24, 25 years?
Yeah, great. And say you keep like using like very loose vagueness to help you, but 54 plots, say they're all 54 plots are as grand as say 9/11.
I just
then what? Then what? 54 cases
of overreach with you, as well as cases filed by ACLU and other organizations and other individuals against.
Yeah, because nothing could possibly be tailored, right? EOD, nothing could possibly be tailored and have oversight. Nothing
violated. And
you're standing against all forms of warrantless.
The government and the Supreme Court of the United States has repeatedly stood against these types of programs in the past and forced Congress to go through and try to redefine them with some sort of judicial restrictions in mind. You're saying that those judicial restrictions are what the problem is. That we can't wait for a FISA warrant. We can't wait the 2 or 3 hours that it takes.
Then we should make police officers wait.
Say, yes, go and investigate further.
If that's the case, then we should also make police officers wait to go into a house where violence is happening. We should wait for a warrant, even if we have reasonable suspicion or cause to enter home. Yes.
Again, with reasonable suspicion.
You said a warrant for everything.
My suggestion has been since the beginning of the debate, since opening statements, I've been saying they ought to be able to detain that person in the very least. And for whatever reason, they think they're not able to. They don't have the evidence or whatever. They're afraid of being sued in civil court for violating the guy's rights because they don't have the evidence that they need in order to obtain the warrant.
It just seems hilarious to me because you're saying black bag people, but don't worry. But don't
because of the warrant. That's because of bad police.
So you want indiscriminate black bagging of people absent a warrant, rather than just saying it's okay for certain information to be gathered without a warrant.
Suspicion of wrongdoing or a crime in progress, yes. And that already exists. If a police officer is walking down the street and here's a domestic dispute going on in a house and someone crying for their lives, the police officer is obligated to barge into that house and at least investigate what's going on.
Oh, so almost like the smoke coming out of your house might be an actual reason for them to come into the house without a warrant?
Not if it's just because I'm smoking a cigarette. That's bullshit.
Well, if there's smoke pouring out the window,
better be banging down my damn door. They ought to knock first.
I think you just proved that there are cases that warrants aren't needed for action.
There is. Occasionally. However, in those cases, the appropriate thing to do is to detain and seek a FISA warrant. Again, you can obtain a FISA warrant within hours. Let's
break this down.
Obtain a FISA warrant.
Okay, let's break this down.
If that timeline is not quick enough, then you are not doing your job as a police officer. That's all there is to it. And in these cases where you're talking, they were on a watch list or something. They knew for months. They've known for months. They had time to go get a traditional warrant rather than a FISA warrant. In those particular cases. Also, a FISA warrant should only apply to foreign actors and incidents of foreign terrorism.
EOD, what is the greatest?
The Pulse nightclub where the guy was,
EOD, what is the greatest interest
of a guy who had like a grudge with somebody or something?
What is the greatest interest of the federal government?
You keep saying this over and over again.
No, I need it to ring home for you. I need it to ring home for you.
Let's talk about this again, okay? And more haystack doesn't find the needle. NSA's own audits, declassified in 2010, showed that 90% of the data they collected was completely irrelevant to what they're trying to do. So 90% of the data here, I'm answering.
What is the
90% of the data that the NSA collected has nothing to do with securing your life. Has nothing to do with it. 90% of the data the NSA collects has nothing to do with securing your life.
Regardless, what is the greatest interest of the federal government of the United States of America, EOD?
I don't know.
To protect its citizenry.
Great. So then
to defend its citizenry.
90% of your resources on collecting data that's irrelevant to that goal is a waste. Not only is it a waste, not only is it a waste of taxpayer resources and federal resources, it's a waste of the Fourth Amendment rights that all Americans are afforded under the Constitution. And
not stopping plots.
It's a waste of the Fifth Amendment rights and the First Amendment rights of all Americans under the Constitution.
Not stopping plots.
Sacrificing the principles that this country was founded upon for the sake
of stopping plots
of terrorists.
Okay, but not stopping actions that will see the loss of life of tens or hundreds or thousands of American citizens is a failure of the federal government. It is in its best interest to protect the American people. And if it is the interest of the government to protect the American people and defend them, then they should have. And it is, in fact, in their best interest as a federal government to gather the intelligence needed to do its job. Otherwise, it's failing the American people. So it absolutely has to be in the best interest of the federal government to seek warrantless surveillance, because what else would it do?
You say that the primary purpose of the United States is...
Will you break the rules to protect your family?
You say that the primary purpose of the United States is to secure the lives of the American people. I say that in securing those lives, it should also guarantee life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are the principles that we were founded upon. Whether or not that is explicitly defined in the Constitution or not is irrelevant to the spirit of what the founding fathers intended for this country to accomplish. And in enacting warrantless surveillance programs, you erode the liberty and the ability to pursue happiness in the very lives that you intend to save.
There is no happiness if you're dead.
Counterproductive to the goal of the goals in the interests of the United States and her people.
There's no rights or pursuit of happiness if you're dead. Period. So it is in the best interest.
Again, wasting 90% of your resources on shit you don't need is not in the interest of protecting 90%. My life either.
Really, you pay 90% of your income in taxes?
Targeted, warranted, scoped investigations that are not big dragnets that violate everybody's civil rights.
Will more or less people be saved with greater information? More or less people are able to be protected?
I suppose it depends on what you mean by saved. You mean their physical lives? Yes, probably. More people will be saved. However, at the cost of how many people's civil lives or their criminal records or
you don't even have those if you're dead, EOD.
Themselves in court against the federal fucking government. How many lives will be ruined based on bad arrests, based on bad investigations, simply because somebody was in the wrong place at the wrong time and it happened to be a terrorist on the other side of the coffee shop? Along with 300 other people.
You're just going to paint intent on the government. You're going to paint villainy and intent on the government so that you can evade their duty to you.
I presume that the government will be villainous in the way that it wields its power, which is why I am so vehemently against granting it anymore.
Which is why you should vote and do everything in your power to make the government moral for a moral people, rather than taking all of its power away and saying the government is not trustworthy. You are saying that the information no, you're the one who's saying the information gathering is a loss of trust in the government while you preach distrust of the government. I wonder which one's worse. Everybody out there preaching distrust,
sure the government can't pry open your asshole and figure out what you had for lunch today is going to inspire more confidence in the government than allowing them to see every single aspect of every little bit of every single person's life.
See, this is funny.
The whole cope from you is just really insane right now.
You're tying disanalogous connections between a physical search of your home and a surveillance of data and information in the form of metadata, text messages.
let's talk about what the NSA would gain if they did get that backdoor encryption into your iPhone. They would get your
I
location.
don't have an
history.
iPhone.
That means every place you've been in the past, however long you've had that phone.
Yeah, because they couldn't possibly know that
everywhere
already.
you've been and everywhere you go on a day-to-day basis. It's going to have all of your emails in it.
What
It's gonna
danger
have
does
all of your
that?
text messages in it. It's
What
going to have
danger?
all of your direct messages in it. It's going to have everything you've ever said to anybody anywhere on the internet in it.
Oh,
Because
so it
guess
would like
what? How
force
many
you to
places
act?
do you go, Abe? How many places do you go where they say we need two-factor authentication? We have to associate your online account
So
with your
it would
phone
force
in order
you.
to maintain security, right? So
So
it's not just being in your home, it's being in your bank, it's being in your weather, it's being in your day-to-day
So
routine, it's being in your direct messages, your private
great,
talks with other people.
great. So it's almost like you would not do bad things because you know you'd get caught. So you'd.
If I had Big Brother staring me down, you're right. I would live every single day
Oh shit!
in
It's almost
morbid
like it would lead
fear
to a more
that the
moral
government might
society.
retaliate against me simply because of something I said on the internet that might not be favorable to Donald Trump, or might not be
Again,
favorable to Joe Biden, or might not be favorable to Dianne
again, you're
Feinstein,
just making
or
attributions.
Hillary Clinton, or anybody else. The whole concept that this won't be abused, or that it hasn't been abused in the past,
Can I tell you?
completely asinine.
EOD.
Again, United States versus Hasbud Jarami, ACLU
Information.
versus Clapper, United States versus Mutara.
Information isn't the same as action.
United States versus Hay. Case
Information.
after case of civil liberties being violated over and over again by warrantless surveillance programs.
There's also a myriad of cases that could have been stopped prior to the action if they had known the information. The same is true that multiple have been stopped because they had the information.
We still haven't seen you demonstrate it. There's nothing to say that warrantless surveillance would have prevented the Pulse night shooting. There's nothing to say that warrantless surveillance would have prevented the Fort Hood incident. Okay.
Data.
What you demonstrated is that the surveillance that they did perform was insufficient, and so what they knew was insufficient to even detain these people. So that's, in my mind, that's bad police work. That's bad mismanagement on the part of law enforcement. That's Christopher Wray's fault.
You sound like a Monday.
That's not the Fourth Amendment's fault. And you want to strip away people's rights simply because of bad management and poor policing.
Nobody said strip away rights.
Yes,
nobody
exactly
said that.
You're proposing. You're saying that the Fourth Amendment doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't matter.
Reasonable cause,
what I just
reasonable suspicion, absent a warrant.
Your life
reasonable,
and you're trying to give them a back door into it. That's insane. No, thank you.
Do you send data out of your phone to somewhere else, EOD?
Do I send packages out of my mailbox? Yes. And those packages are protected.
Disanalogous.
It's disanalogous. My private information inside of that letter. That's my private information.
Is there a record of that?
That's my private property inside of that box. If I ship it to somebody.
Does that thing stay with the shipper and the person after it's delivered, EOD?
It's sealed.
Does it stay with the shipper and
what's inside of it, unless it has some sort of biohazardous?
So it's a disanalogous example. So it's a disanalogous example because the people you're utilizing.
It's not disanalogous. My information on this phone is my private property, and I have a right to keep it.
So private. The phone company doesn't know what's on your phone.
The AT&T, no. There's a case in here somewhere where AT&T got fucking sued to hell and back because they were selling people's data to the federal government. That's another civil liberties violation. Great, thank you for pointing that out. No, right now AT&T does not have a right to my data on my phone.
They have your data from your phone already.
The problem is there's this third party fucking rule is another little loophole where law enforcement and federal law enforcement will try to work with data brokers, which are people that go around to different service providers and gather up all the information about one particular person or another and put that into gigantic databases and sell them for tens of thousands or millions of dollars a pop. And it dumps out, all of the information that I'm talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, all in one fell swoop. All it takes is for, the DOJ to write a check, and suddenly they're not violating your Fourth Amendment rights anymore because they're surveilling you through a third party exception. That's fucking bullshit. That shit needs to stop. That's part of what needs to stop. The federal government needs to get out of my damn phone, and all my shit needs to be private. Go fuck yourself. It's not going to solve anything. I'm not a damn terrorist. Shit.
Okay, so we don't want a moral government, and we don't want oversight by the government.
You got the robot voice, Abe.
I'll give you a second.
thinking. Now I forgot what I was freaking thinking. Damn it. Freaking Robo.
You gotta get that shit fixed. It might
So-
be just replacing the cable. I don't know.
It seems crazy to me that the acceptable reasons to not have warrants, even to you, seem out of bounds. Even if there's a possibility that tens of thousands of lives could be spared or saved, you say that privacy supersedes everything, even life.
No, I think you're misinterpreting what I'm trying to tell you. I think that without our liberties, without the restrictions on the federal government that the Bill of Rights actually places, our lives are worthless, and that our government would become authoritarian. I'm not saying that the Fourth Amendment supersedes lives. I'm saying that there are ways to secure life without violating the Fourth Amendment. So it's not an if then that. Both things can be true at once. You can save lives without violating the Fourth Amendment. You can totally do that. They totally have done that. In fact, when they started using FISA warrants, they stopped more global terrorism than when they were trying to do it without FISA warrants. When they were
Which
trying to
one?
do it under the Patriot Act with the Dragnet.
Okay, so there's a hierarchy of things here. Which one is more important and must first be a precondition for the other to exist, EOD?
Abe, we're not talking about a hypothetical full of absolutes.
We're talking about the truth of the matter.
Actual law enforcement.
If you have no reasonable expectation, if you have no reasonable expectation to survive, because the government cannot stop threats, except for to take the long drawn out way to get each and every warrant to stop every case of fast-paced digital style terrorist actions, then the question would become, does the government have any responsibility to protect you in the first place? If it has the means to protect you and does not do so, has it failed its duty?
Yes, obviously it has. However, it does not require the means to violate my Fourth Amendment in order to secure my life. It can do that without violating my Fourth Amendment. It has done that, and it has proven to be more effective when it uses judicially scoped, warranted measures rather than the broad dragnet shit that you.
Does the government ever have the right to supersede your rights? Does government ever have the right to supersede your rights?
If I'm a convicted felon, I suppose.
All righty. So that is the wrap up for the open hour. So Abe, whenever you're ready for your closing statement, I will start the timer up with your voice. And again, good job to both of you, and thank you both for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right. So firstly, I would say that while I understand the importance of our amendments, they do have to flex to give room in many ways. And we've seen this across the states, in the United States at any given time. There are some flex that has to happen in order to protect and defend the American people. I would say it seems odd to say that less information may lead to more security when it comes to life lost. I understand that the government has taken in the past actions maybe it should not have, but that doesn't mean as a whole we can have zero trust in the government and the institutions that we put in place to protect us in the first place. The prompt, if you remember, is warrantless surveillance is justified in the interest of national security. I would say that the government, we vote in to protect us and itself. And a government that cannot protect the American citizens or itself as an institution has failed. It's failed us, and we have failed as citizens at that point. And so I do see the dangers that EOD is speaking of, but a tailored approach with oversight and a commitment to the American people with a need for jumping on things that are the threat to the American people quickly is a must. We've seen it. That's the only reason these programs even exist. 702, FISA, all of these programs exist specifically because we understand that in the information age, you may have to move swiftly in order to take action. I understand again that there's anti-government or the government is dangerous aspect to this, and that may be true. It doesn't mean that we just absolve the government of its responsibility to protect the American people from threats that are faster moving than a warrant process. So other than that, I guess I'll give back the rest of my time because I don't know what else to say.
Alrighty. Thank you for that closing statement, Abe. And with that, we'll give the mic over to EOD. And EOD, whenever you're ready for your closing statement, I will start the clock up with your voice.
My argument isn't that less information leads to more effective investigations. What I'm trying to say is that when the NSA is granted sweeping back doors into cell phones all across the nation and given these huge dragnets, they get overwhelmed by data, and those watch lists end up way too long, and that's why so many actors on those watch lists end up getting ignored, is because there's too many to focus on, and they choose where to put their focus incorrectly. That's part of what I was trying to say. Abe says that amendments have to flex. Well, every time that our amendments flex, our rights get eroded away. Our country is slipping away from our very fingertips as we watch. And the Patriot Act was a huge misstep. The 2008 housing bubble was yet another one. And this most recent thing for the USA Freedom Act or whatever simply just perpetuated the problem and continues to harness more power, more authority, more oversight into the federal government where it absolutely does not belong. Every single one of our founding fathers understood that. That's why we are the United States of America, not the United State of America. Warrant has failed us. That's completely false. Under the Patriot Act for 12 years, the DOJ, the DEA, the ATF, the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA all conducted warrantless surveillance and produced zero counterterrorism leads. Zero leads that actually stopped anything from happening at all. When they started using FISA warrants is when those 50 cases that you like to reference back over and over again, Abe, actually occurred. Is when they started doing targeted surveillance and actually managing the resources and pointing them at where the problem areas truly exist. Your ethic and your guideline here is expediency over privacy. Okay, is law enforcement over liberty. It's tyranny over freedom. Is ultimately what you're talking about. And at the end of the day, it is not worth the cost. It is not worth the violation of millions of hundreds of millions of Americans' lives and millions of Americans' privacy in order to hunt down and capture a handful of actors. And at no point did we get any definitive evidence or demonstration that any of this warrantless surveillance would have actually stopped anything. There's vapid claims that say, oh, well, if we had seen that Facebook post, then we would have been able to do something. But at the end of the day, these people were already being surveilled. They were already being investigated, and the investigators were unable to produce any evidence in order to support the warrant. So that it had to be dropped. And it's simply a failure on the part of the law enforcement officers who were investigating these things, probably because they were scoped too thin in the first place, given the amount of data that's coming into these agencies and the amount of shit that they have to sift through that means nothing to their investigations whatsoever. They're spending too much time going through too much crap, getting too confused, and getting spread too thin in order to actually accomplish anything. There's a few more examples that I wanted to go over before I actually wrapped it up. You brought up AT&T. The Hemisphere Project in 2007, the DEA paid AT&T to store decades of call records law enforcement queried without warrants, bypass the Fourth Amendment, used in ordinary criminal cases, not those involving terrorism. So again, another appeal that you try to make is that all of this is designed to stop terrorists. Well, how do you stop the DEA from doing things like this, where they pay AT&T to just figure out people's freaking phone calls that has nothing to do with terrorism? They're selling pot. They're selling pot, and you got the DEA looking through their phones with a damn microscope. And the FBI national security letters, you mentioned this in your opening. We never did get around back to it, but the FBI issued hundreds of thousands of NSLs demanding phone, financial, and internet records without judicial review. Gag orders prevented disclosure. And the DOJ IG reports in 2007 and 2008 found widespread misuse and inaccurate exigent letters, affected innocent people, wrong phone numbers, wrongful prosecution, wrongful arrest, and all of these things have been settled since. But these overreaches and oversteps by the government never had to happen in the first place. These people's lives never had to be ruined or pried into in the first place if they had just gotten, a judicial oversight and a warranted scope investigation in the first place. These mistakes and missteps of justice would have never happened. And now, we're tasked with getting rid of this precedent, which has existed for the past 25 years. Past 25 years, the government has been doing this shit. And we're just looking for more and more excuses for them to keep doing it and keep doing more of it. And it's insane. It's a slippery slope. And we're headed towards tyranny. And I don't want to see it happen. So I'll cede the rest of my time, whatever's left.
All righty. Thank you for that closing statement, EOD. And if you're enjoying this debate and everything you've seen tonight, make sure you subscribe to the SpeakeaZy channel as well. All right. Don't miss debates just like this one. We're going to be doing them every week here on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays.